Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be well. Take a moment to be healthy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment every day. Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be well. Take a moment to be happy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment to show you care. Take a moment to show you care. Just to show how much you care. Yeah.
Good evening. It's Thursday, and most importantly, it's 6 p.m. Welcome to Healing Moments. Those of you on Zoom and on YouTube, I want to extend a very special welcome to you for joining us this evening. I want to thank you for continuing to be with us, and I pray that you will continue to be with us in the future. Our topic for this month is sexual health. Now, last month, as you may remember, we were dealing with coping with grief and loss. And we want to thank those of you who sent in your voice notes and your videos for last week's program. Again, this week is sexual health. So before Brother Blemon comes to pray, I want you to get on that telephone, call a friend, and let them know that Healing Moments is on. So before we go any further, let's go into our devotion and our prayer with Trevor Blenman.
Good evening, everyone. As is our practice, let us begin our session with prayer. Heavenly Father, we are thankful that you are interested in the holistic development of us as human beings, mind, body, and soul. We're glad that we have these moments to discuss these various issues so that we can be directed by the science, but more importantly, by your word, as to how our lives should be in terms of the various things we have to deal with on a daily basis. We want to thank you that your word is so full with admonition that we can go there. We want to thank you for the professionals on this program who bring the educational acumen to assist us in seeing these varying problems and the solutions to them. So this evening, we are glad that you are with us. We know that what will be said and discussed here will assist all of us in our daily lives as being better Christians and human beings in this world. Thanks for hearing our prayer. For Christ's sake, amen. Our devotion for this evening is entitled God's Ideal for Males and Females. Our text for consideration is taken from the New International Version, Genesis 1:27, and it reads, So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Have you ever wondered why God chose to introduce into his new beautiful earth male and female units? True, it was his chosen means of populating our planet, but God could have done that in many different ways. He could have spoken inhabitants into existence until he was satisfied that that was enough. But how much we would have missed. Father and son had known the joys of an intimate relationship since the beginning. We get that in John 17. And he wanted earthlings to know a similar joy in several areas of their relationships. So, since he chose to make us in his image, he provided for a special relationship between the male part of his image and the female part of his image. It was to be, it was to be the hallmark of his earthly creation, the gift and power to create. How careful he was about this Edenic event. Adam's significant contribution came from his side. Eve was dependent on him for that. He was dependent upon her for the continuance of life from his seed, complete interdependence. Adam slept during this first surgical procedure. not because God was not a painless surgeon, but more likely so that the first man can never be tempted to employ the argument, I was there, I witnessed your origin. To do so would not have been fair. Then God said 4 significant things to both of them together. He blessed them equally. He told them to be fruitful and multiply, for which both were equally essential. He told them to subdue the earth, involving them both in implementing business. I'm read that again. He told them to subdue the earth, involving them both in implementing submission over it, and enjoining them to have dominion over his non-human creation, in effect, to be co-managers. No one in the white can assure us that even Adam were equal at creation. How thankful we can be to God for his ideal plan, which brought male and female together in a relationship of oneness, side by side, and equals in perfect harmony. There ends our devotional thought for today.
Thank you so much, Trevor Blenman, for your devotion entitled God's Ideal for Males and Females. Now, this afternoon, we don't have a health aspect to the program, but we do have a mental health. And before Sherry Sobers comes, I want to remind you that you, the participants, have your chance to ask your questions based on this afternoon's program. I want you to type it in the chat, and those of you on YouTube, type yours in the chat as well, and your questions will be asked and answered here. Now, again, type your questions in the chat for those of you who have questions at the end of the mental health aspect, and we go to Sister Sherry Sobers for her program.
Thank you, Kathy. Good evening to everyone, and welcome to September. Welcome to Sexual Health Month. I trust that as we go through the presentations this month, that you will learn something, and that you will learn not only about what sexual health is, but some of the other aspects of it. And in doing my research, as you know, I always do my research, and I always start with a definition. And I found 2 interesting definitions, one from the World Health Organization and the other from the American Sexual Health Association. I'm going to share them with you. And later in the presentation, I'll actually share a pictorial description as well. I'll say to you some of the things that we'll speak about may not necessarily all be Christian, but the reality is that we live in a world of good and evil. So therefore, my disclaimer to you is that some of the views that we may discuss may be a bit controversial, but that is the nature of sexual health. I trust that you join me in this journey as we learn more about sexual health. So let's go to the definition. And the definition from the WHO, World Health Organization, states, it is a state of physical, emotional, mental, and the social well-being in relation to sexuality, and not merely the absence of disease, dysfunction, and or infirmity. I found that quite interesting. Sexual health encompasses a lot. It is broad and deep. But the definition continues by saying that it is fundamental to the overall health and well-being of not only individuals, couples, and families, but it goes even further to talk about the social and economic development of communities and countries. That is how broad and that is how deep it goes. Sexual health, when viewed affirmatively, requires a positive and respectful approach to sexuality and sexual relationships, as well as the possibility of having pleasurable and safe sexual experiences, free of coercion, discrimination, and definitely violence. The ability of men and women to achieve sexual health and well-being depends on a few aspects, and I'll share them with you. Number 1, access to comprehensive, good quality information about sex and sexuality. Number 2, knowledge about the risks that they have or they may face and their vulnerability to adverse consequences of unprotected sexual activity. Number 3, the ability to access sexual health care. And 4, living in an environment that affirms and promotes sexual health. So all of those factors determine or are determinants to whether some person can have a good or a bad sexual health. Sexual health issues are wide-ranging and encompass things like your sexual orientation, gender identity, sexual expression, relationships, and simply pleasure. They also include negative consequences and or conditions. For example, infections like HIV, human immunodeficiency virus, other sexually transmitted infections, reproductive tract infections, and their adverse outcomes such as cervical cancer or infertility. Unintended pregnancy or abortion, sexual dysfunction, sexual violence, and harmful practices, for example, female genital mutilation. Those are the negative consequences of poor sexual health. Coming up with a definition, WHO says, is a difficult task. Sorry, not WHO, the American Sexual Health Association. But for them, sexual health is the ability to embrace and enjoy our sexuality throughout our lives. And the reason why this association determines that the definition is so difficult a task is because it looks at the different aspects of life. For example, your culture, subculture, and individual standards. Now, but that association concludes that being sexually healthy means, number 1, understanding that sexuality is a natural part of life and involves more than sexual behavior. That's important for us to remember and understand. Number 2, recognizing and respecting the sexual rights that we all share. Number 3, having access to sexual health information, education, and care. Number 4, making an effort to prevent unintended pregnancies and STIs and seek care or treatment when needed. Number 5, being able to experience sexual pleasure, satisfaction, and intimacy when desired. The last one, being able to communicate about sexual health with others, including your sexual partners and healthcare providers. So even within sexual health, there is communication, which is important. Now, you would have heard a word mentioned about 3 or 4 times, sexuality. And that is a big part of sexual health. But what is sexuality? It is a word that we use to talk about how we understand our bodies and how we understand our relationships. This understanding includes all aspects of who we are, ranging from our values and beliefs to our bodies, to our desires, to our relationships and our thoughts and our general feelings about all of these things. Because sexuality is made up of so many different components, our understanding of our own sexuality is unique and ever-changing. And I found a very interesting diagram that shows us how all-encompassing sexuality is. So at this time, I want you to look at the diagram, and it's called the sexuality wheel. And the sexuality wheel shows how broad the definition of sexuality really is. Each part of the wheel, from values to sexual activity, socialization, sexual orientation, gender identity, each part shows that they are all connected to the whole. The boxes on the left, for example, gender identity, gender expression, social orientation, they show who we are by nature. The boxes on the right, like communication, sexual activity, and relationships, show who we are taught to be or who we learn to be. So let's look at them. Let's start first with the boxes on the left. So let's look at personality. And as the mouse goes over each one, it gives you the definition. Personality, combination of traits or characteristics that make up a person's unique character, who you are uniquely. The next one, gender identity, a person's internal sense of identity as male and female, both or neither, regardless as their sex assigned at birth. Gender expression, how a person expresses their maleness or their femaleness, their gender. This can include appearance, name, pronoun, and social behavior. Sexual orientation, a person's emotional and sexual attraction to another person. It can be fluid and may or may not reflect sexual behaviors. Sex, different categories. For example, male or female. When you have a form to complete, there's usually you see sex and you see male or female. You don't see how often or very much or whatever, you see male or female. Experiences are, when we talk about experiences, we talk about the experiences that you have gone through, your stories, what you can tell, your personal experiences. Going on up, self-image, and we know the self-image is how we view ourselves. The image, when we look in the mirror, what we see and what we think about ourselves. Socialization has to do with our family background, our learned behaviors, which would include customs, attitudes, values that are acceptable to a specific social group, community, or culture. These on the right are the learned behaviors. Communication, as you would have said previously, has to do with how you connect, how you share information from one person to the next. Sexual activity, as explicit as it is and as clear as it is, has to do with the kissing, sexual touches, those kinds of things. Relationships have to do with the way we connect, how we are connected, and the relationships do not only refer to male, female, but we have our friendships, we have our platonic relationships, we have our relationships in our family as well. And finally, and very important, our values, a collection of ideas that people see as important, a set of assumptions about how things are. So you see how all encompassing this broad term sexuality is. And each part of the pie, if you look at it this way, each part of the pie is interconnected. The way how we communicate lets others know who we are as a person. They tell people about our values, how we see ourselves, determine how we view our relationships, how we view our bodies, and things of that nature. So I trust that this month we'll have an interesting time together. It will bring up some things that may be uncomfortable. It may bring up, unfortunately, bad experiences that we may have had. I hope most of all that it replaces any of the myths that we would have had, and it helps us to focus on the positiveness of being a sexual being and being sexually healthy. And as I leave with you a quote, and I found this quote to be quite interesting. It's taken from a lady by the name of Judith Haslov. She wrote in her book, Standing Again at Sinai in 1991. And she writes, if sexuality is one dimension of our ability to live passionately, then in cutting off our sexual feelings, we diminish our overall power to feel, know, and value deeply. I trust that as we continue the remaining of this evening's program and the remaining of the month, that we truly get an insight to what sexuality is, what sexual health is, and all of the aspects of sexual health. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions, queries, and comments at the end of the program.
Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be well. Take a moment to be healthy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment every day. Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be well. Take a moment to be happy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment to show you care. Take a moment to show you care. Just to show how much you care. Yeah.
Thank you for staying with us, those of you on Zoom and on YouTube. It is now your time to ask your questions and have them answered. And we have one question so far, and it says, why after having sex before marriage, the relationship messes up? Isn't sex supposed to bond you? I'll repeat that question again. Why after having sex before marriage, the relationship messes up? Isn't sex supposed to bond you?
Brother Trevor, you are free to weigh in as well as I speak. After I speak, we're not hearing you, Brother Trevor, but what I will say that the question kind of answers itself, because for the most part, and I can say 75%, maybe even more, you find that most people who engage in sexual relations before marriage, they may not necessarily be the person that they are married to. So where the bonding occurs, yes, there is a bonding. There is an emotional bonding. There is a physical bonding. And some persons may even go as far as to say there's a spiritual bonding. So therefore, yes, it can possibly mess up, quote unquote, anyone who has been involved with multiple sexual partners and none of them being the person that they eventually are married to. But we know that our God is a forgiving God, and wherever there are issues and problems, there is always the aspect of healing if we understand how things go and if we seek that guidance. So the question really answers itself in that, yes, sex bonds you. And so therefore, especially if the person that you are not married to is the person that you would have participated in sexual relationships before. Brother Trevor, you're free to jump in here.
Okay, I think that the reason it feels that way or you have that feeling because it is wrong, it goes against what God the Creator wants. If that is the way He made you and you go against Him, obviously you can feel some discomfort. So I think, like Sherry said, the reason is obvious. You've gone against God dictates. He's your Creator. He knows what's best for you.
Thank you, Elder Blyman and Sherry Sobers. Now, we are looking in the chat to see if there are any more questions. If you have questions, you can just raise your hand and we will unmute you so that you can ask your questions.
Just to add as well, Kathy, most young people experience a lot of guilt. You see what you said there just now, Brother Trevor, and it plays on your mind. And we have to understand where Christianity and the church goes in terms of the teachings for for single persons, let me put it that way. So therefore, when that occurs, the torture that you face sometimes is it causes a lot of emotional and mental discomfort. So add on.
Yes, Sherry, and to add to that, I like the point that you made that God still forgives. David messed up sexually, and he forgave him. So Mary of Magdala, she was a prostitute, and God forgave her. So it is not that God will not forgive you. So you don't approach it now. All manner of sin can be forgiven by God, and he will forgive you as long as you ask for it. So that guilt should not be carried because you think that God has forsaken you. I think the guilt comes because you've gone against him, but not that you're guilty and God holds that against you. All manner of sin, as long as it's confessed, God will forgive.
Okay, we have another question in the chat, and it says, how should a Christian married couple go about trying different positions?
The Bible says that the married bed is undefiled. So I think that will be something that is personal to them. And one of the things that counselors advise persons who are getting married is that talk about your sexuality. You're experimenting. So she should tell her spouse, husband, what pleases her, and vice versa, as they experiment. So I think as long as they are comfortable with what they're doing, like I said, the Bible says the marriage bed is undefiled. I'm not getting into things like bestiality and those type of things, but I'm talking about within the concept of two people experimenting and finding out what is best for them.
I totally agree with you, Brother Benman. The marriage bed is undefiled, but more importantly, sexual intercourse is something that should be enjoyed and pleasurable. Amen. So it involves communication. What we just saw, communication as one of the parts of the sexuality wheel. It's about talking about what I like, what I don't like, what I would like to try, what I would not like to try. And it is on both ends, both male and females.
I want to ask a question based on that. How about if you keep telling the person what you like and what you don't like, and they still continue doing the same thing?
Well, the person that you should be having sex is somebody who loves you, and he or she aren't in the marriage for them to make them have a day in the marriage to please you. So your partner, he or she should be looking to please the opposite sex. So if you have displeasure with something, then he should respect that because you're his wife, you're uncomfortable with it, you've gone to the point to tell him that, but he should stop. He says stop it, and vice versa. If there's something you want to do to him and he doesn't like, and he tells you, then it should stop. So like you said, Sherry, communication is important, and honest communication. Don't continue to do something that gives you displeasure simply because you want to please the person, because then whenever sex comes around, you're going to look to run from it, because you don't want to go through that experience.
And remember, sex is just one aspect of sexuality and one aspect. While for some it may be an important aspect, it is just one part of a marriage relationship.
Correct.
Okay. The last question so far in the chat says, is it true that sex begins long before the act?
I will let you answer that, Sherry. I think that's a woman's response. guys are always ready.
Yeah. I actually have a friend who had a book. Her husband bought it for them when they first got married. And it's entitled Sex Begins in the Kitchen. Not that the act begins in the kitchen.
Why not?
But that, yes, it can begin in the kitchen. It can begin anywhere. But the reality is that, yes, sex begins long before the act. So therefore, it is, and from a female's perspective, we are not like switches that turn on and off. And I know for men, it's the same thing. So sexual intercourse is just the act, but there is also sexual intimacy where even before sexual intercourse, there is sexual intimacy. There are things that you can do or that you should do with your clothes on, touching, just a touch. A touch can make a big difference. Holding hands, kissing, all of those things are part of the whole idea of sexual intercourse, but they're like steps leading up, progressive steps, moving towards obviously the ultimate act. So yes, it begins long before the act. And it can begin in the kitchen.
You're muted, Sherry. You're not Sherry, Kathy, we're not hearing you.
Sorry. We have a question from Marian Paris on YouTube, and it says, if you want to live a spiritual life, is it wrong to ask God to take away those sexual feelings?
I need you to answer that.
Is it wrong to ask God to take away those feelings? The Apostle Paul, he said that it was a gift to him, celibacy. And he said to all men, if you don't have the gift, it is better to marry than to burn. So apparently God doesn't take it away. He shows you how to deal with it. So I don't know if I don't know if you should pray for God to take it away or at least help you to manage it. I think that would be the better response, because with God all things are possible. If he give that particular feeling or desire to you, he can show you how to keep it on the check. But like I said, the Apostle Paul, he was celibate, and he termed it as a gift, a spiritual gift. All men do not have it, or all people do not have it. But if you've chosen that way, I'm sure with God all things are possible, and he can guide you how to live that celibate life if you want it.
I think that sexual feelings are all part of who we are as a human being.
Yes.
And God to take away something is to ask God to remove a part of us, a part that defines us as humanity. So I like what you said. Help us, ask him to help us to tame it, to control it, to manage it, but certainly not ask us to ask him to remove it. Because what if we meet someone and I'm just thinking a what if situation, and we don't have those feelings. That's not like I believe God would just remove them, but we speak in the present, but the reality is that we still have to understand that there's a future and we don't know what's around tomorrow's corner. So to ask God to remove something that the Bible says we are fearfully and wonderfully made, that's part of who we are as fearful and wonderful creatures. So to ask God to remove it, no.
Okay, I have another one in the chat, and it's asked, why did God say that all sins that are done within the body sins against his own body?
I don't get the question correct. Can you read it again? I think
Okay.
the question is going, but I don't get it clearly.
It says, why did God say that all sins that are done within the body sins against his own body? I'm not sure. I don't know. Brother Theo, can you open up your mic and clarify that question for us, please?
Yes, Sister Theo. I was asking the question on the Bible, I think somewhere in 1 Corinthians or so, speaks about sin. And they also talk about sins that are done outside the body as well as sins done within the body. And it says that when a person sins outside the body, yes, it's sin, but it is able to thing. But when a person then sin within his own body, to me it becomes like detrimental. So and the Bible says that he sinned against his own body. If I could just, you understand me, Elder Blemon?
Yeah, I know what you're speaking of. Yes, I know what you're speaking of. I think Paul is stating there that sexual immorality affects you in a manner holistically, in the sense of your thinking, where you operate. So you sin against your body in that it's something that comes from, is intrinsic. So you might physically, you might be okay, but because you've gone a road that you shouldn't have gone, it continues to affect you from that manner. Obviously, as I said earlier, God can forgive, but it tends to be more intense when it is done to you personally from within the body than you do something to someone.
Just to add to, can we also add the aspect where we are reminded that our bodies are the temple of God, and therefore anything that we do, we are defiling, we are literally, if we damage our body temple, it's damaging a part of God. So
Beautiful.
therefore,
yeah.
Right, okay.
Okay, I have another question, and it asks, must the long process of sexual intimacy occur every time, or are quickies out of the question?
I think as long as both parties are satisfied, time doesn't matter. That's a personal thing. That's a personal thing. As long as both parties are satisfied, the length doesn't matter. But when the whole act, when it's carried out, it should be satisfaction for both persons, whether it's a minute or hours.
I agree with you, Brother Blairman, but what I would say as well, whereas we enjoy the long, there's things that we enjoy, we like to take our time and we like to enjoy it to the fullest, but then there are times when we want it done quickly. So I think it has to do with the couple, with the relation, with the couple, as well as the situation, the circumstance.
Correct.
So everything may not always be one that you can spend. You can start from the hand holding to the touching to the kissing to the intimacy and stuff like that. Then there may be these passionate times when you just want to get it over and done with. So it just depends on the situation.
Agreed.
Okay, the last one I'm seeing so far. Why does my husband fall asleep right after sex?
Was that question asked by my wife? I think it is something that the doctor or those people will tell you that when a man has sex and he's satisfied, the next thing you want is sleep. You really want to wrap and hold on and talk and nothing. The man wants sleep. All the men that are on the chat there should come and say, yes, Brahma, that is true. But it is something that the way we men are made up. We stay awake until we get it. But when you get it and it's satisfying, the next thing you want is sleep. Women don't want to cuddle but the husband, however, he has to practice that. No, I cannot fall asleep because my wife needs at least 15, 20 minutes to continue in terms of feeling that intimacy. So we should adjust. But the guy you finish, bring it down, sleep.
I think from a medical point of view, there's also something that we can add. Then, especially with ejaculation, there is that energy that you release.
Right.
Before you get tired, you are physically drained, and therefore, as you say, you need to replenish by sleeping. Some women, it works that way as well. For others, they want to go and clean and sweep and all kinds of things afterwards. So it's just, I think there's a physical aspect to it. So I'll be interested in hearing. I think we need to hold that question for Dr. Dupuy next week, Sister Kathy.
Okay. Okay, next question. My wife falls asleep and I want to cuddle. What should I do?
You want to answer that, Sherry?
My wife falls asleep and I want to cuddle. Cuddle her.
Cuddle.
Cuddle her as she sleeps. That is the most I can say. Cuddle her as she sleeps. And eventually you will fall asleep as well.
I want to thank you all for joining us on Healing Moments this evening. As you can see, it has been a very interesting and enlightening program. It has been a very interesting and enlightening program. I can't wait until next week to continue this program on sexual health. And I'm sure that you can't either. So in doing that, I want you to tell a friend about this week's program, tell them about next Thursday's program on healing moments, sexual health, tell them the amount of fun we had, and tell them the topics that we have discussed. So until next Thursday, I'm asking you to join us again for Healing Moments.
Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be loved. Take a moment to be healthy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment every day. Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be loved. Take a moment to be happy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment to show you care. Take a moment to show you care. Just to show how much you care. Yeah.